the link. I think that's one of the pictures on the RISC PC, is it? It says there's one called the Team.
Okay. Wouldn't surprise me, yeah. Yeah, because it's a lovely little thing. It's, in a little business park. It's got sculptures and trees and, yeah, it's really nice. It's in the middle of the village I live in, actually. And that business park is built on the site of a jam factory. It's built Chivers Jams. Yeah? So that's where they were made. They were made in this village. And then as the manufacturing technology improved, they didn't need all of the land to make the jam on. So they built a business park on the front half of it. And there is still a jam factory. They still make jam in Histon. So, but it's for some other company. It's been through several hands since. Bit like what I was doing with the computers.
So did thin clients actually get taken up?
No, not really. Not RISC OS based ones. No.
Because I know there was some stuff. I think Castle did some stuff.
Yeah.
Or was it Kumana did some thin client stuff? And we're looking at taking it to hospitals and basically stuck a set 500 on the back of a CD, and that was like an information display thing.
Yes.
Which could be remotely controlled. So it could be like patients waiting or stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, so there was quite a lot. Yeah, I mean, conceptually, it sounds like a brilliant idea. It just never quite caught that moment when people went, oh yeah, we'll have 10,000 of them, and we'll kit out all of this. Because if that had started to happen, I think other people would have done it. There were some quite sizable benefits for thin clients in terms of what they could do and how you could manage things. And all the traumas of IT management these days of passwords and versions and all those kinds of things that people have to handle with all the different devices, you wouldn't have had. It was basically like a terminal, but a bit smarter and with the processing more locked down. Yeah, yes, I would have liked. Yes, you thought that could really fly, but no, no, it never really did. And I guess the need for the control didn't work, and people went more independent, I suppose, is what really happened in the end.
Because I know the low power would have been a good selling point, because I think there was a thing that was saying, like, when schools went over from RISC PCs to normal PCs, you needed an extra technician and some air conditioning.
Well, you need air conditioning, and also the noise level goes up. So these things were silent, so there was no noise, so that everybody could talk to each other normally, whereas once you've got fans running, there's, if you've ever been in an office when the power goes off, I don't know if anybody's had that experience, when there's a power cut, and it suddenly goes, ooh, and you go, wow, is it quiet in here or what?
I used to work at Leeds University, and we had some Pentium 4s. It's almost like having a lawnmower going on at the time.
Yeah, it would be. And they still are, even now. I mean, even laptops that run fairly low power will crank up the fan when they get going. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
When we sort of started to first hear about ECommerce, probably before your days.
Yes, it would have been. Yeah.
Chris, the sort of word was, and the true story was, that when they started to make the BBC computer, when they got that contract and started to make that, they expected to make a fairly small volume of them, but that was grossly exceeded in the sales that they actually haven't done, turned into $1 million or something.
Yeah.
So, how much do you feel that shaped Acorn's philosophy? Did they believe they could do that again?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They believe they could do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And to some extent they did. To some extent they did with some of the machines in schools. And also the vision was that the thin clients would be that again. Well, why wouldn't they be? They're really small, they're cheap, they're neat, Why wouldn't you have loads of those around? Because they're really easy in comparison to the cost of the equivalent computing hardware from others. So, yeah, I mean, you're always looking for the next big thing. I mean, that's kind of what happens when you... But to some extent, a technology business has to do that, because if you're not part of the next wave, you're behind. Witness companies like Nokia that were the absolute leader in handsets and then suddenly disappeared and fell off a cliff. So you kind of have to be with the next thing and up with it, or you're not. And so it's obviously difficult with the scale of an American market to compete against the big American players, Windows and Intel and Apple.
How were they intellectually to work combine things, really throw a technical fee.
Unfortunately, technology isn't the only bit. So you've heard me talk quite a lot about the marketing, the sales and stuff, because that's the bit I was doing. I mean, that's why I'm talking about it. It's a bit I understand. But you need all of that as well. Just having, and one of the things that's occurred to me, having been through this and various other things, is that if you have a product that's better than someone else's, you think people should buy it because it's better. Because you know it's better, because it is. Right? Okay? Objectively, on whatever metric you choose, you know your product's better. If you're trying to sell a product that's worse than the competitors, that's quite hard work, because you know their product's better than you, so you have to work really hard at selling it. And since you get paid based on what you sell, you work very hard at selling it. And so you get good at doing that. And eventually, as you sell more and more of those, that product gets better. But also you get better at selling it, at marketing it, at getting people to buy it. Even if it is the worst product, it doesn't matter to you. So you actually get more and more efficient at doing that. I mean, the old joke about Windows was, it's got the blue screen of death. Now it's customizable. You can have green, pink, or yellow. Yeah, it's that kind. But that's not as far removed from reality as you might imagine. It's just take a weakness, turn it into something, and push it like mad because we've got this. And they don't have that. It's like, well, we don't need that. It's rubbish. But that's what happens in the marketplace. And you push and push and push and push. And eventually, the people with the better one go, well, why is nobody buying ours? Because it's better than this. We're not out there going, this is fantastic. You should. and that's what happens. You see that in lots of different technical spheres. And I think Acorn was a little bit like that. And it's actually characteristic of Cambridge companies is they're very intellectual, they're very creative, they're very imaginative, and they're rubbish at sales and marketing. Most Cambridge companies are like that. I've worked for a few. Obviously, the ones I work for were better, but very rarely, very rarely. I've only ever once worked for a company that really did do that, and it was after Acorn. I worked for a company called Geneva Technology, and they wrote billing software for telcos, and it's just deathly boring as a subject area, but there's a lot of money in billing, as you might say, and so the CEO I worked for there was a brilliant CEO. He was very, very good, and he really got that idea about needing to invest in it, and we did. He's the only CEO I've ever worked with who came to me one evening, and went, "Just don't think we're spending enough on marketing. If I gave you another 200,000, could you spend it?" Right? Yeah. So if anybody's ever come across anything that never, but it did actually happen, and I actually had to say to him, "I don't think I can spend all of that. I mean, obviously I could, but I don't think I can spend all of it well. Probably about 100, given the team that we've got and how we're working. I don't think I can spend all of it. We could probably spend 100, 150 of it, but possibly not the whole 200." But he said, well, "Okay, get on with it then. Go, just go, more, spend more on marketing." And we spent a lot on marketing in that company. That resulted in that company getting bought out for about $800 million. At the time, we were turning over about 200 at break even, something like that. So, because we had this value that everybody could see, and they could see it because we told them endlessly. In every forum that we could manage, we told them about it. So, yeah, I have seen it when it's worked, and yeah, so it can happen. Yeah, so quite a lot of people, not me, unfortunately, made a lot of money out of that. Unfortunately.
It is a British disease, I'd say, that we've got some of the best engineers in the world, but not the people to market that. To really promote it and really drive it home. Some of the best marketers.
They have pretty good engineers too, actually. Having worked with some of them, some of those guys are really very, very, very good, and they struggle with some of the marketing. Actually, yes. Is the flip side of it, where marketing tends to. Anybody who's ever read Dilbert would understand that. Oh, yes. Yes, that's not as that's based on reality, Dilbert. Yes. So people who write into it. Okay, all right. Woo. But yes, so it's quite exciting. But you know, it's hard to know what else we could have done from when I started with Acorn, because part of you alluded to the fact they suddenly had to ramp up production when they weren't expecting to, and that stresses a business. Really stresses a business, and you're always playing catch up at that point. And then the next thing you're doing is kind of buried under this massive backlogs and orders and things that people are shouting about, and you know, stuff doesn't quite work right and all that sort of stuff. If you look at Tesla now, you'll see that same sort of process going. You know, but they planned for that, whereas Acorn didn't plan for it. It just went, "Wah! We got to make more of these," and they have to do it. And outsourced manufacturing to China didn't exist when they were doing that, so it was manufactured in the UK. I believe so. I think so. Celestica was the company that did it when I was there. We did while I was there. No, that was somebody. That was the other company. No. So yeah. So that migrating stuff offshore was not a thing back in the 90s. It came much later than that. Or, you know, it came quite a bit later. So yeah.
Okay. Well, the day that Acorn collapsed and you went down the pub.
Yeah.
Was probably at the time one of the worst days of your life. Have you ever worked for any company since where you felt that same buzz and excitement?
No, really not. I mean, the stuff, what's really interesting, when you look back over, I wasn't there for very long. It feels like quite a long time, actually. Yeah, so 95 to 98. Not a terribly long period in any company, but when you actually look at what we went through reorganization, we went through different divisions, we went through setting up this, we went through that, we went through an attempted MBO. It's like, in that small space of time, went through quite a lot. And Acorn was always a bit like that. It was always right on a hairy edge of doing something that was completely off the wall and crazy and everything else. But yeah, so no, I haven't really felt like that. And as we went to the pub, I said to the team, do not be despondent. Celebrate. And they're like, wait a minute, we just lost our jobs. What are you talking about, you idiot? I said, no, we should celebrate what we've done. We did some amazing things in the last year or two. Okay, it didn't work out, but we did some amazing things. You know, so let's celebrate that. And I celebrated that night, and one or two others celebrated rather longer, like 2 or 3 days. But you know, it was quite a lively. Yeah, it was quite a lively place to work.
So it was a learning curve, but a worthwhile one.
For me personally, I've never been in anything quite like that ever since. I wish we were able to have done it better, is my big wish. Particularly the MBO bit, if we'd been able to do that better. Whether thin clients would have taken off if we'd actually been flogging them, I don't know. But it's possible. It's possible. I mean, there might have been, yeah. I think, yeah. And it might, you know, we would have had to experiment and shift and do all the technology stuff of like, try this, no, try that, try this. Move it on, but I never quite managed to make the numbers stack up. Basically, I was trying to hold on to too many people, was what happened. Rather than having a small core team of half a dozen engineers and that's it, and one guy doing manufacturing, I tried to keep 4 or 5 doing manufacturing, 10 or 15 engineers, and it doesn't work. It just didn't work. I had to have taken it much smaller to let it grow again. But yeah. In hindsight. And I did have somebody tell me that about 2 weeks before they kind of closed down the whole MBO thing. But by that stage, it was just too hard to even countenance, rip up everything I'd done, strip out some of the products, put in something else, put some different assumptions in. Yeah, it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy process. But it was, yeah, it's a real pity. Because we were working on a new version of Risk OS at that point. Yeah, I mean, to go with RISC-PC, to go with Phoebe, to go with RISC-PC 2, we had a new version of Risk OS with some really whizzy features and all sorts of stuff that we just left in a big smelly heap because nobody wanted it anymore at that point until it got resurrected. And it's still going. That's what I couldn't get over because I met the guys doing it at the moment because I did a similar talk in London a few months ago. And he was there, and you know, it's kind of like he's trying to market it still. So it's not gone completely, which I found amazing, to be honest.
I actually demonstrated RISC-OS to a bunch of, shall we say, Silver Surfers
Okay.
A few weeks ago, and I said, well, in essence, we have this in, what was it, 80?
89, 90.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, yeah.
So what excuse does Microsoft have?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were all impressed.
Yeah, I always used to say, so Mac's got 1 button,
Yeah.
PC's got 2, and Acorn's got 3.
Yeah.
And how many years did it take them to get to using 3?
On a Windows machine. Yeah, I know. I know, it's just crazy. It's just, yeah. And even to this day, there is still nothing that's better than Draw for doing random diagrams. I mean, it's just, there is no product that matches anywhere close to what that could do. It's like, in any of the suites.
The reason we all use it is because it makes more sense to us. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever looked into the human-computer interface. It's sort of like, not quite a bête noire of mine, but when I drive my car, I go, who put that button there? You know, and why is that obscured by this and all that sort of stuff? And RISC-OS basically doesn't have a lot in the way of you trying to do something.
No.
Whereas when I go to Windows, I have to open the file manager twice, so I can see where it's coming from and where it's going
Okay.
to.
Yeah.
So I go, drag and drop.
Well, you can do that,
Pick a
but no.
decade,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. I mean, most of those things are now in some form or another, but just not as elegant and certainly not as early and not as lightweight as well. I mean, when you look at the sizes and stuff that they were working in those days.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think first memory stick I got was 64 meg. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
and you could put programs on
Yeah.
it. You know, and that's probably like the start of the Windows program. You know,
Doing it. Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah. No, it's really good. Yeah.
Do you still use any RISC-OS?
No. No.
You've given it up.
No, because that was the end of it for me. I was like, I can't, not, no. No, I don't, unfortunately. Well, I did get a Raspberry Pi and stuck RISC-OS on it, just because you could. And it seemed like a sensible thing to do. It's like, oh, this actually works. It's good. But yeah, it's kind of the whole drivers and I mean, one of the ongoing battles we always had. It was new hardware, new drivers, new this, new that, and the level of investment needed just to keep up was really quite high, and it's really hard to maintain that. Which is why we couldn't have done that. We'd have had to focus in on something much more discrete if we were ever going to make a success out of a business. And actually, in hindsight, the Raspberry Pi is the successor to almost everything Acorn did. When you look at it, this small, neat little device that people use, that are sold in the millions now, that run really, just simple, low power, do lots of random different things for all sorts of different places. They really, I mean, that is almost like, that is the successor to me of everything that we did. And but it's not running RISC-OS, obviously, but it is running an ARM chip.
I think there was, I'm trying to remember which developers conference it was, I saw in one of the magazines, and basically they said, right, you write in Java, here's your Raspberry Pis, we're throwing the desktops away.
Okay.
That's what you'll be writing for.
Okay, something small, lightweight. Yeah, keep the power consumption down, keep the weight of it down.
And
Yeah.
I know I've had, well, prior to the Raspberry Pi, I had a thing an A9 at home, and it just took 3 watts, so I've left it on for 12 years.
Yes, because they just don't take much.
Switched off for really long holidays.
Yeah.
For a fortnight.
Yeah, but that's what people are doing with Raspberry Pis now, isn't it? I mean, they really are. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of, it's quite. Oh, right. There's more paperwork. Slowly. How are we doing on this? It's kind of filtered its way through all you guys, and it's kind of heading towards the back now.
Just see how many t-shirts and mugs they have.
Yeah.
Out of interest, what is your preferred platform?
I use Windows because that's what everybody in the business world uses.
Right.
So, well, that was what everybody in the business world uses. A lot of them now use Macs, but there's a transition happening. All the sort of upper end management all you have Macs now, but and lots of students do as well. That's quite a common platform. I never made that transition, mainly because I resented paying so much money for essentially the same level of performance. When I worked out in Silicon Valley, so when I worked in the UK, we used Windows, and then I moved to using, this is a long time ago, and then I used a Mac, and actually I got things done quicker on the Mac than I did on Windows, and I went, that would have taken me ages under Windows. Gosh, this thing does actually do something. I think the difference is smaller now. much, much smaller. And I'm just more familiar with the other one. So yes, I have a laptop, you know, because I run Word and I run Excel and I run, because that's what everybody else uses. And that was always the big problem with the thin client. And still is. Even if you had one now, it still wouldn't work, because they haven't ported it onto ARM platforms properly yet. They are.
Well, looking at, I think we've got some of the Android stuff now that they're using. No, sorry, Windows they are using.
Linux is what, yes, they're starting to with a bit more Linuxy stuff.
They're not the best,
Yeah.
but obviously they're looking at using ARM. So it'll be interesting to see how Intel's shares go in a few years.
Yeah, well, struggling a bit.
Intel are looking at ARM at reduced instruction set computers.
Okay, yeah, of course,
For
yes.
some reason.
Yes, yeah, they would do. Yeah, they would do. Yeah,
Like they might do a bank.
yeah. So yeah, so that's kind of what it was like inside. What else have I got lurking about here? I've got a couple of annual reports from various different times. If anybody's interested in those, or you probably already saw those, I'm assuming, because they were all public. It's more the business plans was the main bit I wanted to get out and just let people and things like the stock lists and stuff like that. That they're kind of historical now.
Yes.
Not now we've moved to that sort of phase.
No, I was going to ask Chris.
Yes.
To me, those documents are really, and surely out to you as well. I could spend hours and hours pouring over. Have you got them scanned in?
I haven't. No, I haven't done. I've never done that. I would just.
It'd be great for the community to have copies of all this stuff on
Yeah.
the internet somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have a think about that. Because I did actually have I do actually own a copy. Oh no, I probably better not say that. I'm on tape. But yeah, so I have to be a little bit careful about what's sensible to give out and stuff from some of the other bits and pieces I had. You got to think about GDPR and things like that. But yeah, and other commercial confidentialities. But no, because those were ones mainly that I wrote, like the Project Neon thing was stuff that I was working on. So I feel more, and it's doesn't matter to anybody now. But yeah, so yeah, interesting. You'd actually spend time looking at that. Okay, interesting. Okay, I'll have a think about that. Yeah, I don't see. This is all I have. I haven't got electronic version. Well, I probably do have somewhere. I don't know, but.
Well, as you say, basically switch the company off and.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, so.
Nobody had any data anyway, did they? Really?
No, we didn't take anything. I mean, these were bits I'd had at home from working on them, basically. So yeah, so all the rest of it stayed really. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right. So that's actually it's interesting. That's actually because it's quite interesting when you go back in time looking at the thinking. I mean, actually, even now looking at them, it's like, I wonder if we got that right. Because with the benefit of hindsight, you can then see what would have happened, might have happened, which I haven't ever done.
Well, it must be the catch of business planning. How can you plan for all the eventualities?
Well, you can't, but you have to give it your best shot.
It's best guess to some extent, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's working on what your assumptions are and what your models are, and making sure that it does at least at some level add up. And if you do that, then actually you can get quite good. You won't predict everything, but you can anticipate some things. There's a certain amount of work on those sorts of things you can do. But mainly, the audience for that wasn't me. The audience for that was the people who were going to invest in the business and give us the money to do the MBO with. And so that's why it has to hit a certain level of crispness and clarity. And we never quite got there. If you saw from the July Arthur Anderson letter, there's this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. They were working with me on that, and then they write a thing like that. It's like, guys, maybe you could have mentioned some of this, and we might have been able to do something about it. But yeah.
Investors are interested in the risk minimisation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, they want to make sure they get their money back. Yeah. If you ever watch Dragon's Den, it's exactly that's the pitch for Dragons. That's a Dragon's Den type pitch, except the numbers were quite large, measured in millions rather than in thousands, and the risk was enormous because we had no idea whether anybody was going to buy this stuff. We didn't have a proven market or anything.
But if it took off again in the same way that the BBC did, then the profits were potentially not as well.
Yes. Like any hardware business, if it goes well, that you do make a lot of money on them. You do tend to, or you used to in those days. I think probably less so now. But Even so, Apple and people manage to make money on it. But yeah, you can make money at hardware, but you need scale and you need volume to make that. And that's what we were really trying to gear for, and trying to keep as much of the community. The beauty of working with the community was that there were all sorts of things that popped up out of it that we could potentially use. So there was a guy that did a line export to the RISC PC. I actually met him in his bedroom. That's how it was done, But there was one guy working on his own, had done all of that, and you're thinking, how on earth do you do that? but there were all these kind of little amazing things going on, all the way scattered around in all sorts of places. And it was, if you kept that going, then there might be something really good that might make a big difference on a large scale later on. I mean, the Ant browser being an example of something that potentially could have been really, really good, because it was up there with Mosaic at one point. And it wasn't far off the Mosaic level of browser. So, yeah, I mean, these days you have what we were doing there is what we now call a smart telly.
Yes.
Basically. I mean, it's not that dissimilar. What online media and Acorn were doing is now called a smart TV.
In a way, they're almost too far ahead of themselves, weren't they?
They really were.
Broadband was only really available
Yes. Yeah.
in Hull, effectively,
Yeah.
as far as could work out.
Yeah.
Because that was their own little system, wasn't it?
Yes, that was online media. Yeah. So, well, they did have some stuff in Cambridge as well, but yeah.
Yes, but basically, I think they got the potential to have
Yeah.
the broadband or.
Well, it's ATM actually was what they were using, but yeah. So there was they were miles ahead of anything, and the user interface and everything else, and everything was a bit flaky, like cutting edge technology tends to be. All of it was it wasn't that usability that you get nowadays, that people are used to now, where you plug things in and they kind of work. Yeah, none of that existed, really.
Like you were saying, different technologies. I don't know quite where this one came in and went out. The Acorn Replay movies and stuff like that were some of the smallest ones, apparently, for the quality size that it had. And I think Stephen Streeter was the guy who worked that one out. He then went on to do, I think the IDOS stuff. And that's the thing that Lara Croft uses, the
Yes.
compressions, because it was his baby.
Yes.
That out of the system.
Yeah, so that's the kind of example I'm talking about, where there's some really amazing thing that just makes that significant difference to delivering something that people actually want and will pay for. Sorry, I know I talk like a marketing guy because I am, but that is quite important actually, because if you haven't got people willing to pay for it, then it doesn't matter how good it is. It's very difficult to maintain. You can do it on a freeware basis, you can do it on a sharing basis, and that's fantastic. And an awful lot of the open source stuff like that now is phenomenal from that point of view. But it's very difficult to keep it ahead of or up with what's out there at the best. So, yeah.
One of the things I remember from my early days with
Yeah.
Acorn programs, was the BBC National,
Okay.
was the first one I ever bought, was the amount of support we actually got.
Mm.
When they came here and spoke to us, who was that guy, that rep they had in the area, used to come and speak to us fairly
Steve
regularly?
White, was it?
Sorry?
Steve White, was it?
Steve White, yeah.
Okay.
Steve, yeah.
I'm amazed I remember.
Okay. Well, yeah, and my appointment in '95 was all about making the most of that, trying to get that level of communication, build that relationship, encourage you guys, but also listen to what you were saying to some extent and feed off that and build on that, which is what I was just. So you can hear, So I mean, internally I was known as Captain Anorak. So that was what everybody kept referring to you guys as anoraks, right? And I was like, no, they're not. I'm not having that. No, you guys. I mean, there were some absolute genius people in amongst the community. I mean, really, really good, and really, and it's trying to build and value that, and trying to get that dialogue going and get as much of it as we can possibly manage, in amongst all the chaos of everything else that was going on, and all the machinations and all the top level stuff that happens in any business, and particularly seemed to happen quite a lot. For the short while I was at Acorn.
But it's quite funny now that it's quite a small community. In a way, it works for itself to some extent.
Yeah, of course.
If you ring up the person who runs a company, they probably wrote the software or built the hardware. So
Right. Yes. So
you the answer, it's that.
they either know it or they don't, and that's it.
Or
Yeah.
here's the patch on the email coming tomorrow.
Yeah. No, that's true.
That's like the thing you'll never see in big corporations.
No, not so much. No.
It's not going to happen now. to next year's update or on monthly subscription model.
Yeah. Yeah.
Contrast that with the way we're treated by people like Microsoft.
Yeah.
And one of my sort of professional IT project manager colleagues once said to me, I'm sure it's absolutely true, that you get absolutely anything out of Microsoft except that's your help.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Yeah. You get help from most other people who've actually solved it for themselves, don't you? That's where most of the help comes from at Microsoft. Yeah. So.
One thing that's always surprised me a bit, sort of more found out about Acorn companies
Mm.
that I sort of grew up with, is how small everything was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All the companies that you saying that browsers being written by one person.
Yeah.
Acorn was a small company, relatively small company.
It is. It always was a very small company. Yeah.
How much more life there was in that, given that, I mean, I know from my own experience now professionally in a slightly different field, that once you start to sell into industries or markets that are as big as have got players like Microsoft and so on in them, you need the same resources to be able to compete and actually produce the same level of value.
Yes.
I just wonder how much longer RISCOS had and Acorn had in the sense before it did dissolve into a kind of small cottage industry or service. Because we'd have had to have grown up, we'd have had to have grown very quickly and got a lot more resources into.
Yeah. Well, so when you look at the shift that happened when they moved to ECommerce Technologies, which was the end of '95, that was a strategic recognition that time had come, right? So they had decided at that point that the computer business they weren't going to win in, but we did have some really neat technology that could do interesting things. We just didn't quite know what yet, but if we could figure it out, then we could probably sell a big lot of them. And that was the mission of ECommerce Technologies. That's what their objective to do, was to figure out something that we could do that was neat, interesting, different, better than anything else on the market, that we could partner with somebody or work with a customer who would give us money to do it. Network Computer was one example of that, but there were others in amongst all the sort of panoply of stuff that went on. But that sort of nascent technology work is actually quite challenging. Even when you have a pretty good base to start with, you've got stuff that actually does things and works, it's quite hard to make a product out of it that will appeal to a customer. And NetFax was probably the prototype example of that for me, because it consumed quite a lot of the time inside the business. So basically what they made was a little box with an LCD screen on it that you could control, that would scan documents and then send them by email. So you're using the email clients and all this, stuff that we had, because we know how to do that. Scanning, yeah, we can do that. Put that in a little box. Power, doesn't matter, run it off a little DC block. That's fine, we can do that. But getting the user interface and getting the selling of it to a client base, which is what the client was supposed to be doing, never quite seemed to get their act together. They were American. Never quite seemed to get their act together on that. But that was an example of building a product out of the technology that was completely different from what we were making as a product, but actually used some of the components that we had in a new way. And that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to find the next thing that could really rip, and then we would be part of that and surfing that wave out. I mean, it could have been a mobile phone handset for all we knew. We probably had enough stuff to do if we'd ever heard of them. But yeah, because we had quite a lot of bits from having made computers. And then not having to keep making all of the stuff to make a computer. All of it. Just focus on some pieces of it and then just specialize in those and let it rip. So I mean, there are companies around Cambridge that do smart TVs that are largely based and use people and some of the technology that RISCOS, came from some of the RISCOS world and have now evolved beyond that. Because, yeah, we were good at video. Actually really very good at video in a low power, small scale, cheap way. And so smart TVs is a natural sort of fit. Putting a web browser with a television, we could do that. We could put a web browser on a television. Very few people could do that because they didn't have the screen resolution handling that we'd built up from the schools work that we did. So things like that, we were much better at those sorts of things than almost anybody else, and we could do them. But then you needed a browser that was up to date and competitive. And some Nico got bored and did something else. So, and advertising wasn't very good. So yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it's that sort of thing. We were looking for that. So strategically, they decided that. My workstations business was like the hangover, just milk it for as long as we could, part of the thing. And in the end, ended up costing a bit too much money when we tried to make the yellow monster. But yeah. Yeah, okay. Is there anything else?
Any other questions? I mean, Chris is staying locally tonight.
Yeah.
So he's not.
I'm not rushing off anyway.
Not rushing off. So if you want to have a natter with him,
Yeah, and carry on looking at those things.
yeah. So, but anyway, it's very interesting, and perhaps we can thank Chris in the usual way. Not the tomatoes, no, the other one. Yeah, super. Yeah. Thanks very much. Yeah.